Hello, welcome everyone to the last day of the Manila PTG. It's been a good week and all of the sessions are already available on YouTube. So if you are curious about the output of a specific session or want to check on the previous sessions, uh, please check the Manila channel on YouTube and then all the sessions are going to be available there. Yeah, it's been a good week until now, and I'm sure you're going to have a good day today. Uh, the first topic of the day is the uh, NetApp CI Zuul V3 migration, and the NetApp folks are here to share with us the challenges they had and the lessons they learned. NetApp's been up for a while, and they had a Zuul V2 setup, and they started the migration to Zuul V3. So yeah, I think they can provide more details on that. So please, Eduardo, first yours. Do you want to share your screen?
Sure, let's do it. Yeah, so for me, it says that host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, sorry. Which Eduardo do you want to? Oh, I can make both. Oh yeah, and then this one.
We cloned Eduardo for the presentation.
Yeah, it's like double knowledge, you know. It's like
Yeah.
two Eduardos.
Yeah, it's just that the microphone from my laptop is has a kind of a muffled sound, so I use my phone for audio.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, I can share now. Yeah, so Carlos already gave the introduction. I'm part of my name is Eduardo. I'm part of the NetApp team. And this presentation is about migrating our old Zuul V2 CI to the newer version, which is Zuul V3 Plus, which is actually now it's like a version 5.3, I believe, not completely sure. And yeah, this is our agenda for this presentation. Not gonna go into much detail right now. Gonna cover them in further detail in the next slides. This presentation will not be about these topics. So I'm not going to talk specifically about Zuul itself, like how it works and like internally how you make jobs run and how pipelines work. But you can ask at any time if you want, or at the end of the presentation, we're also going to have a questions section where you can ask your questions regarding Zuul or any questions that you might have. So just a quick intro for if we have any new contributors in the meeting or watching this later on YouTube. We are NetApp, and NetApp has like an array of storage related, enterprise storage related products. One of them is ONTAP. I believe it's their flagship product, which is a really, really cool storage controller that has a lot of different functionalities and like the other vendors as well. And we provide storage backends for the Cinder and the Manila projects, which they regard respectively to block storage and shared file systems. And being OpenStack projects, if you are a third-party vendor for OpenStack projects, you need to have a functioning CI system reporting status of tests upstream to the OpenDev community in their Garrett server. And you cannot go like your CI system cannot go inactive for, I believe, 1 month or 3 months. I'm not sure. It has a period of time that if you go like unreporting, your driver will be considered unmaintained. So yeah, having a functioning CI is a big deal if you are an OpenStack vendor. So we have been using Zuul V2, which just like a software that was developed initially, at least, specifically for OpenStack, for testing OpenStack projects, because they are very like, sometimes changes, patches are very dependent on each other on the OpenStack project. To have a patch on Neutron that maybe depends on a patch on Nova or something like this. And yeah, so Zuul, it covers a lot of functionality that OpenStack needed when they were using Jenkins initially for their CI. So from the get-go, we were using Zuul, but we were using an older version of Zuul from 2015, maybe 2016, I'm not sure, just Zuul 2. And the problem is that it has been deprecated for a long time now. And we've been having a lot of problems with it, and this migration to a newer version, it's been long overdue. One of the main issues that we have, and this still haunts us, like I believe Andre was fixing a problem with this like 2 weeks ago, which is DevStackGate, which is a deprecated project, and we rely on it on our older Zuul 2 CI, and it just stopped cloning like Git repositories all of a sudden, and Andrea had to waste some time on this some weeks ago, and our the node pool on the Zuul system we have, they are actually forks. So at some point in time, we forked them from OpenDev, and I believe the date is around 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And we are still using this forks. So we didn't receive like any updates, I believe. I believe there were some commits internally to manually update both software. But yeah, I believe it's not optimal, and they are full of like little hacks and workarounds for problems that we've had along the way. And it's keep like piling up. It's like a snowball, and it's just keeps getting worse with time. Even now, like with us knowing that we're gonna migrate to Zuul 3, it demotivates us to keep fixing things in Zuul 2, because we know we're gonna move to Zuul 3 at some point, and we're very close now. So yeah, it's the motivation. This is all the motivation behind we wanting to migrate to Zuul 3 plus. And some of the differences, I believe the major difference between the V2 and the V3 plus Zuul is the use of Ansible, which is both Jenkins Job Builder and Ansible. In Zuul V2, it used Jenkins Job Builder for building jobs, and now it uses Ansible to execute jobs, which is both systems, they do like similar things in Zuul. They're kind of the backend, like how Zuul does things, how it executes things on test nodes. And in my opinion, Ansible is just more elegant, and it's everywhere now. So yeah, and it's maintained. So we're going to be able to upgrade whenever a new version comes. And yeah, that's nice. And we hope that this will change things for the better for us. So when you decide to either migrate or deploy Zuul from scratch, you have a couple of options. You can either install Zuul and Nodepool, which is like a companion program for Zuul, which provide test resources on a bare metal machine or a virtual machine using Python packages, which is like the most bare bones kind of installation for Zuul. Or you can use prepackaged container images that the Zuul project they make available in Docker Hub, which is a nice alternative. The images are supposed to work out of the box, and you pass some environment variables to them. Or you can use Software Factory, which is the option that we went with for a couple of reasons. it's really easy to deploy and upgrade and maintain overall. To deploy Software Factory, you literally just need 3 commands. It's that easy. So it has a lot of it deploys a lot of cool services. It's not just like only Zuul. You can also have a Garrett server. You can also have an Etherpad or the HALD, which is like the a code search program that searches Git repositories in Garrett, which is really useful, really cool, and other services as well, like Grafana, which we don't actually use, but yeah, it has a lot of an array of services, and you can choose which ones you want to. You don't need to deploy Garrett if you don't want to, but you can choose, and they are all integrated very well with one another, and also you have a single sign-on system. You can choose to use like Google or Launchpad for your single sign-on system, or use the internal CL system that was developed specifically for Software Factory. So like an internal HTTP based a single sign-on, very lightweight, and yeah. And one of the best parts, I believe, about Software Factory is how it treats configuration. The acronym here is IAC. It's wrong. It should be IAC, my bad, which is infrastructure as code. And so when you deploy Zuul, you have like a bunch of configuration files. Some of them, they need to be tracked by a Git system. For example, the configuration items like jobs, pipelines, projects, they need to be inside the .zool.yaml file or inside a zool.d folder. But some configuration, they don't necessarily need, and they will not be inside the Git repository by default unless you like create a Git repository with it. And one of these files is the /etc/zool /zool.conf file, for example, which is a common place for this file, where you have like common options. Like it's not in the YAML format; it's in the MS ini format, and it has like common options for all Zuul components and some general options that operate that works on Zuul on a more operational level and in a more low level. And this is not tracked by default on a bare bones Zuul installation or a container-based installation, but it is tracked by default on Software Factory. You have a Git repository called config, where you have all the configuration files from all of your services, including Garrett. So you can edit Garrett ACLs there. You can change how really any of your systems services they work, and this will be tracked by a Git repository. So you can look back on your Git history and see how changes were made, how issues were fixed. So this is really useful and interesting to have in a CI system. The first step in migrating was exactly how we're going to do this, because it's a kind of a big task, and we wanted to do it the right way, because we don't want to have to migrate to another thing or another version in a couple of years again. So yeah, the best architecture that we could came up was the reuse architecture, which is we are going to reuse what we know that already works, and we have high hopes of this architecture be maintained, which is to reuse the OpenDev jobs that the OpenDev folks already developed upstream for them and for everybody, because it's open source. So they have a job structure, job genealogy, let's say, and they inherit from each other. and they have their own Ansible playbooks, and we can kind of build upon that. And it's a nice architecture because if something breaks upstream, like DevStack breaks, for example, it will also break for us, but we'll have help because OpenDev will be already trying to fix it. And after we have like everything working for us, we can also help them if we find a solution first. And we can like interchange information via IRC. So yeah, this is like interesting for us. And the process of using this strategy for us, it went like the first step was to replicate the same images that were being used by OpenDev, and then the same base job, which does like a lot of important stuff, and then the rest of the job structure, job genealogy, using the same roles, because we're gonna use very similar playbooks. They're gonna call the same roles, and just build upon that. And our job, which is like NetApp related jobs, are gonna run like they will be just the head of the spear, in the end of the spear, just and we're gonna build upon all of these jobs that OpenDev already developed. So the first step of the migration was this image builder, which is a tool for for building images. And the need for this tool is because, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in time, the OpenStack project used the official cloud images for systems like Ubuntu or CentOS. But they can be kind of unpredictable because when some packages change for this cloud images, especially Python 3 related packages, they can break DevStack. And this is a problem. It was happening all the time. So the guys just decided to create this tool, develop this tool, which is this image builder, to build upon minimal, very minimal file system images that they download from. They're like cloud images, but more minimal, and you customize them using change root and a bunch of shell scripts, and you can do whatever you want. Everything you can do inside a shell script, you can do to these images. And after changing them and installing packages and installing services, you repackage it and upload it to like a Glance service on an OpenStack cloud or AWS or whatever your cloud provider is. And you have like this custom image that it's more minimal, and also you have more control over what packages are in it. And yeah, you get the idea. So yeah, some of the issues we had was this just didn't work out of the box for us at all, because we were using Software Factory on CentOS, and we wanted, one example was that we wanted to build Ubuntu images using the Ubuntu minimal element. But the Ubuntu minimal element, it requires the debootstrap package. And this is a Debian package, which was not available on CentOS. And we had to, there are RPMs, but I believe it's from EPEL or something. So we made it work, but it isn't on the official CentOS repositories, and some other packages as well. So if you're using Software Factory or a bare bones Zoom installation, depending on your operating system, you're probably gonna come across this if you're using this image builder and node pool builder, which is some elements will need some packages, and you probably won't have all of these packages installed. So you gotta pay attention to the logs and do what they tell you to do. Also, a very big issue we had was the user that Zuul uses to connect, to make an SSH connection to the test nodes. This is like a really big problem we we wasted some time in this, which is the Zuul user and the Zuul worker user. So how it works is there are two elements, two disk image builder elements, which is the Zuul worker and the Zuul worker user elements. There are two different elements. The first element, Zuul worker, is from OpenDev. It lives in the OpenStack/project config repository. And what it does, basically, it creates a user called Zuul, and it sets up SSH key pairs for authentication so that Zuul can connect to the nodes using that image. And you have the Zuul worker user element that from Software Factory that does exactly the same thing. The only difference is that in Software Factory, they use the Zuul worker username instead of just Zuul. And in Zuul, the system, the default username for connecting to nodes is Zuul. But in Software Factory, the default username for connecting to nodes is Zuul worker. And this is hard-coded. Like they hard-coded this in every Software Factory deployment, at least in the latest version, which is 3.6. And this will not be the case anymore for next versions, but at least in 3.6, this is the case. Because they had some issues and they had to hard-code it. I don't recall the details. And yeah, so you got to pay attention to for like third-party vendors that are also planning on deploying Software Factory. You have to pay attention if you are using the correct element and the correct username in your node pool configuration. Because unless you do this, you're gonna get an access denied when Zuul tries to SSH to the test nodes. And if you just want things to work out of the box, I would recommend using the container images on Docker Hub that the Zuul project provides, because these images are supposed to just work out of the box. You don't need to install anything to them. And yeah, so the next step was to replicate the job genealogy, which is the jobs that you see on your screen. That they basically set up the node, creating users and setting up SSH key pairs. They configure the firewall for multi-node jobs. And then they write your local conf for dev stack and just execute the stack sh script. And then in the end, we have our NetApp-based jobs for setting ONTAP backends in the local conf files. And some of the challenges we had in this step was that some of the tasks in the Ansible playbooks for OpenDev jobs, they are very, very OpenDev specific. And it's important to note that this is not actually like something that is OpenDev's fault. It's just an issue that we have with this architecture of reusing OpenDev jobs. That we need to go around these issues. And so some of these tasks are, for example, the configure unbound and the mirror info roles, which respectively configure a DNS service and sets up a script to run OpenDev mirrors. And this is not the case for us because we won't need any complex DNS configuration, and we don't use any mirrors. We just use the default repositories that come with the images. And one big problem that we had was that in some elements from disk image builder and in some playbooks also, you find sometimes, not always, but sometimes, some hard-coded strings that are OpenDev specific. And this is the case for the OpenStack repos element, which is an element for disk image builder that clones OpenStack, OpenDev repositories. by default, it clones all OpenDev repositories, like more than 1,000 repositories. So if you want to speed this up, you need to pass an environment variable, and it will clone only the repositories that you want it to clone. But it saves all these repositories in a folder, and by default, this folder has the opendev.org string in it, in the path. And this is a problem if you use, because Zuul, in order to find these Git repositories later to deploy DevStack, it will look for a folder based on the Gerrit connection host name. So let's say that the Gerrit server that you're running isn't opendev.org, which is opendev.org isn't actually the domain that hosts Gerrit, it's the domain that hosts Git. The domain that hosts Gerrit is reveal.opendev.org. But anyways, you get the idea. And so if you use another Gerrit server, you have a problem because Zuul will try to look for the DevStack related repositories like Neutron, Nova, Cinder, Manila on another folder that doesn't have opendev.org in the path. And DevStack will fail, saying that, hey, we can't find the repositories and we're gonna fail. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind if we're using OpenDev playbooks and jobs. And they use custom mirrors. This is not a problem, but it happened once that I recall, where DevStack broke for everybody, but not for OpenDev. So all the jobs were passing, but nobody could deploy DevStack. And in that instance, this was because the custom mirrors from OpenDev, they used like slightly like not the latest PyPy packages because of some older wheels. I'm not too much into theory of that, but so it can happen that something breaks for you and not breaks for them because they have custom mirrors. And this is also something to keep in mind. You will not always have you will not always have the same identical infrastructure as OpenDev because of mirrors, unless you use their mirrors, which I'm not sure if you can do, but yeah. So specifically talking about our jobs right now, which for Manila will be the Manila.NoSS and Manila.SS, which respectively are jobs for driver handles share server false and driver handles share server true mode of operation. In Zuul, you have the concept of pre and post playbooks, which respectively are playbooks that run before and after your actual job, which is the actual job is running DevStack, running Tempest, and collecting results. So before running the test, running DevStack and running the tests, we want to do some basic configuration in the node, like installing some dependencies, adding entries to the hosts file, and then we clone a internal Git repository which contains some of our own playbooks, and we run nested Ansible. It's a concept that I'm going to explain in the next slide. And we run this nested Ansible to request ONTAP resources, like ONTAP, the information from ONTAP clusters that we have, that we maintain, like IP addresses and what is the username, what is the password, and yeah, any other information useful for building a local conf file for ONTAP. And that's what we do. We get this response and write it to the local conf file. And in the post playbook, after the job is run, we run a nested Ansible again to tear down all the resources that we created. So let's say, let's say we need to create, for example, like NFS exports or connect to a CIFS server, do some setup before jobs Tempest tests are executed using ONTAP as a backend. We need to set up services like NFS and SMB on ONTAP, on these ONTAP clusters being used for the job. We do this during the pre-playbook, in the last step of the pre-playbook. And after everything is done, we tear down everything we did on those ONTAP clusters. We tear down and clean them up so that these changes that we're making to the clusters, they don't pile up and like a lot of leftovers, let's say, from these jobs are left in the ONTAP clusters. So they keep being on a useful state, operational state. And talking specifically about the nested Ansible, which is a very interesting topic, in my opinion, because this may or may not be the case for other OpenStack vendors, but in the case of NetApp, NetApp maintains a set of Ansible Galaxy collections and roles in Ansible Galaxy for managing some of their products, including ONTAP. So we have the NetApp.ONTAP collection, which has like a lot of useful modules and roles for administering an ONTAP cluster. And this is very useful for us because that's exactly what we want to do in the later steps of our pre-playbook, where we create a lot of resources, and in the end also where we delete a lot of resources. But there's a problem, which is Zuul, at least until now, until its latest stable version. It doesn't support Ansible Galaxy roles and collections at all. So we confirmed this with the Zuul developers. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. And the only workaround that they themselves recommended is using that nested Ansible, at least for now, which is Zuul is already running Ansible to run all the jobs. It's running playbooks and roles. And we're gonna use a task, an Ansible task, that's gonna install Ansible inside the task node and run Ansible inside the task node. So it's Ansible running Ansible, thus nested Ansible. So this way we can use collections, Galaxy collections and roles inside the task nodes. I believe this is not the most elegant way, but unfortunately it's the only way. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is going to change because there's a specification proposal that I think it was already accepted for Zuul, where they're going to remove some of the restrictions that Ansible had running on Zuul, where they will be able to update the version that they support of Ansible right now is 2.9, which is very old. It's already end of life. So they will be able to update and support newer versions of Ansible that has support for collections. And maybe we won't need to use nested Ansible, and this will be available at the Zuul level without needing to do this workaround. And yeah, these are some links that I found them very useful. I'll post them in the Zoom chat for if you're in the meeting, and so you don't have to type them in your browser. So the documentation, it's really important to read the documentation because at least for Zuul, everything is very, very well documented. If you don't have a good understanding of how CI works, in the beginning, you'll have like a hard time, which was my case. But if you already have like a good understanding of how CI works, pipelines work, if you already know what a pipeline is, even not knowing Zuul, you will do just fine. And everything is documented, at least for Zuul, everything is documented. So yeah, I'll start by taking a look there. And at the right, you have some of the repositories, OpenDev repositories, where you can find useful stuff, like where the definitions of the elements or the disk images that they use, the jobs, and the playbooks, the roles, everything is in those repositories, the most relevant stuff at least. And yeah, I believe that's it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask away. And yeah, I believe that's it.
Awesome. Sounds easy peasy. How long did you take to get this from Zuul V2 to Zuul V, or rather, should I say Zuul V 2.5, some zombie version, to Zuul V3?
Yeah, so yeah, looking back now, it wasn't, I can say it wasn't easy, but I'm not sure. Maybe Andre or Kaique will know better, but yeah, it has been like a lot of months now that we've been working on this.
Yeah,
If
I
Kaique
would
is
say it took at least like a one release to complete. I think like we started
yes.
like a few months before, but like a very like a babe steps, trying to understand what was the requirements for it. So at the beginning, it was like a we couldn't progress much, but yeah, but I would say like a one release to make it happen, and still there are some points to fix. We are really close to the go live. I think like less than 1 month to have all the upstream jobs reporting directly in the OpenDev, the job logs. And but there are still jobs to be ported to Zuul V3. For example, there are internal jobs that are not yet ported yet. That like so yeah, there is a lot of work to do. It's not like a fully completed, but now we have the entire flow, and that's like the effort of like Andre, Eduardo, and Kaique. They did like amazing job on making it happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. And there are a ton of questions on the Etherpad, and I don't know how many of them you can get to in the time that you have. But I see that you've already, probably started looking at them. Maybe we should probably go through some of them. What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think we can go over those questions. We still have some time, and I mean, there is some interval that we can use an extra interval. Yeah, so let me share my screen here. Okay, here you go. Right. First question on the list is Gautam's. Can you share the slides someplace, please? Make them available.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure where should I share them. But yeah.
I think we can. Like, I don't see the problem. I will ask David just to make sure. But I think it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Gautam suggested slide share. Yeah, could be.
Oh yeah, and it has NetApp branding and all. So I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
if
yeah.
David approved, yeah. If
That's
David
the only
approved,
problem.
no problem.
Right. Please check that, and then if you are able to make it available, please share the link with us, and then we can add this to the summary of the PTG as well. Okay. So next question is like any intent to share some content in form of documentation for Manila. I'm asking this because we will definitely benefit from a third-party CI documentation, like a more complete one. We have been seeing contributors struggling with setting up CI systems, and then sometimes they usually get lost because like there are lots of documentations. I remember like when first like checking the Zuul and software factory documentation, there are lots of use cases, but I mean, yeah, we could definitely benefit from someone using this for this specific use case, and then I think that wouldn't be useful only for Manila. That would also benefit other projects that do need to set up third-party CI from vendors. So would you be considering to contribute with some documentation? We can discuss that and start the documentation for this in the contributors or some third-party CI session.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, for me, that sounds like a great idea. I've seen this one person, which is like his IRC username is FZZV, if I'm not sure. He was asking like a lot of CI related, Zuul related questions. So yeah, he is, if I'm not mistaken, also using Software Factory. So I'm not sure if he or she's in the meeting, but this may be useful for them and other folks as well. So yeah, I cannot compromise then, like for, let's say that I'm gonna do this right away, that I'm gonna do this right away, but it's a very nice idea.
Yeah, I think we can provide a documentation for it. Of course, in our pre and post YAMLs that have some specific NetApp steps. So we invoke the NetApp Ansible collection and so on, but the NetApp collection is also available. But it would be good to have an idea of what we are doing in our pre and post. Maybe this is pretty useful for the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for,
Of course,
any storage system, right? That's kind of what the this thing would be, because I mean, running it upstream, it's kind of it's gotten a whole lot easy for us. Setting up any storage system, we kind of do it on the DevStack host, whether it's FFS, ClusterFS, etc. So we have some sort of DevStack plugins for them. So it's easy for us to invoke those plugins even before the service is set up, so that we have a storage system that is working with. But if you have to interact with a third-party storage system that's all outside of the cloud, external to the cloud, it's worth seeing where can this go, I suppose. So even if you don't have to share the exact playbooks that you're doing, but this is where you're invoking the server setup. This is where you capture the configuration that you need for the job later on, and so on, or whatever tricks that you've used for determining what config goes into the Manila.conf, for instance, or Tempest.conf.
Yeah,
so that's useful to see.
And if another vendor can use another technology to interact with their storages, so we are using the NetApp collection, but if another vendor could use a REST, so it's possible to use a REST in Ansible. So the important to see is where we add those steps and what which steps is responsible for. So I think it is a very good documentation to provide.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
And like anyway, like we will need to we already writing, like we have some wikis that we already written, but like we will need to have like a proper documentation internally. So it's just basically just a question of like writing in a way that it could be also shared with the community as well. So yeah, for sure, something that like
Or for both
Yep.
projects as well, for Single and Manila, because the structure is the same for both.
Awesome.
Exactly. And it might be for the same for Ironic or Noah as well. And if it's, I know how much of this would probably be a drain on you guys to write the documentation. If it's much easier for you to like do some screencasts and stuff, that's also very helpful.
Okay, yeah, we will like start thinking on something, and like we can discuss on the IRC, like get your opinions, maybe like let's think on the main topics that we must like thinking in but sure, that will be something really nice, and it's also very important for us because we like it's very important to have like the procedure to continue to
Maintaining
like
it, right?
yeah
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And another thing, I don't know if you want us to organize, we could even have these calls through this release. Maybe you can do this in parts. If you wanted to do a live, hey, here's how I just installed Software Factory on a node, or here's what I did to configure this job, sort of thing. And we can do the recording and the sharing on the Manila YouTube channel, for instance, for posterity.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's gonna be
Thanks.
really helpful. And if you need help, just tell us, and then we can see how we can help you to get that. But yeah, with reviews and such, we can definitely help. And if we have also, I mean, it can be like collaborative. We can ask also the peer folks, because if they've done that, so if they do have something else to add, I think they can contribute to that too. Awesome. Next one is, I think we have time for one more because we need to get to the next session. So what's the CI infra like, and what's the minimum we can get away with that? And how often disk images are being built, or have you customized the disk image builder manifests or post tests or whatever?
Yeah. So just to what do you mean with minimum we can get away with? You mean like components?
Yeah, I'm just
like,
repeating a question from the guy that you were mentioning, right? So FCCF, he was trying to set up his system. So he's like, okay, so how many physical servers do I need to get to get a working CI system? Like, does Zuul have to be distributed across multiple things? Can I get away with running an all-in-one Zuul? And can I install Notebool on the same node and so on? So that's sort of a thing.
Yeah, you definitely can. Actually, for our deployments of Zuul, we are using all-in-one installations of Software Factory. So it's everything in the same virtual machine, not even bare metal machine, because it's for development. But for production, it really depends on how many jobs you're running. What is the volume of jobs you think you'll be running a day, for example? And depending if the number is high, you should like distribute this in more than one server. It's everything will be configured in the Zuul.conf file. You can pass like a list of Zuul executors, Zuul web servers, and etc. So yeah, but yeah, you can get away with just one host for everything.
We are in this step right away. So we are configuring our production environment. We are testing in the development one, but now we will see these possibilities to have all-in-one Software Factory installation and how it will impact instead of using a node environment with Zuul. So we are separating some servers to do it, and also to serve as a nodes. So this is our steps right now.
Makes sense. Awesome. And what about the compute nodes? Like I suppose you have an OpenStack provider to provide for the node pool nodes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We are using two providers because for now we have two providers for Manila and Cinder that can run in the same provider, the FCP provider, and also I think the FCP provider need another one specifically because the configuration of this fiber channel. And also we have providers more weaker to run some check jobs, the PPH and so on. But this is basically our infrastructure right now. We have some very strong servers to have as node providers and OpenStack providers. And we have the FCP ones that are specifically for Cinder. and more weakers to handle with the PEPH and Pi3 that we have in our downstream environment?
Yeah, so for the minimum you can get away with, I would say that I've tested one virtual machine or bare metal machine for a OpenStack cloud, which is going to be the cloud provider, and another host for the software factory, another dedicated host for an all-in-one deployment of software factory. But I believe you can also like have a virtual machine or a bare metal server, deploy the OpenStack on it using any of the your preferred deployment tool. It can be DevStack, although DevStack is not for production. And you can create projects like for logical separation. Like you can have a project where you put like one virtual machine or like I don't know how many virtual machines you want using Nova for your infra, like Zuul, Nodepool, Garrett, whatever. And you can have another project inside the same cloud that's gonna run only test nodes. So the virtual machines being created on the another project are just ephemeral, and yeah, they're gonna be created, destroyed, and that's also, I believe it should work. This is the most minimal that I can think of, using a cloud at least without using static nodes.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I think we can't stretch too much more of this. I would like to have like all of these questions asked, addressed, but I think we need to proceed to the next topics. So if you folks could please take a look at the questions here and post some answers, it would be awesome. And then we can share these things in the summary for the PTG as well. So yeah, we are 5 minutes late for the next topic. Sorry about that. But let's try to get like a 5 minutes break so we can get to the next topic, and then we can start talking about FIPS. How does that sound?
Awesome. We'll take a look at the Etherpad.
Great. All right. So 5 minutes break, and then we are going to be back. Recording. Awesome. So yeah, thank you to the NetApp folks for the previous presentation. It was a good session, and it's good to see that your setup CI is going well, and thanks for the detailed information on this. The next topic we are going to have is FIPS compatibility and compliance. So yeah, it's basically me, Ashley, and Ade. Thanks, Ade and Andre, for joining us for this session today. We have some things to talk about here, and yeah, I would like to start for this topic. So let's go over a quick recap on what's FIPS. We talked about this over the past PTG, where we introduced it a little bit and talked about what does compatibility mean for FIPS. And over the cycle, we had a few changes going on. We are going to go over them. But yeah, FIPS is basically a set of standards that describes document processing and encryption algorithms and other information technology processes for use within non-military federal government agencies and by government contractors and vendors who work with those agencies. And you can enable FIPS mode in a machine to ensure that it will comply with such conventions. And in a nutshell, the work for FIPS is about like making sure that your product operates when FIPS mode is enabled in the operational system, and it follows the crypto guidance and uses the certified crypto models. This is pretty much it in a nutshell. If you guys would like to add something and to correct me if I talk something wrong, please feel free to do so. Yeah, so in the last PTG, Gotham and Ade mentioned about this possibly becoming a community-wide goal. And it actually became just like that. Ade proposed the goal, and then it was merged during the last cycle. You can access the goal looking over here. And here there is like some more information on what's FIPS and what's compatibility and what's compliance. So compliance, we were trying to do some changes, like even in the previous cycle, and the main effect on turning FIPS on the kernel. Here there are some definitions for it, but yeah, for compatibility, the goal was basically to ensure that the OpenStack functions correctly when the control plane nodes are running FIPS mode. So we should basically ensure that nothing is going to break when we enable FIPS in a machine. And that would be enough for compatibility. But for compliance, it's another scenario where we need to ensure that any crypto operations that are performed are done using crypto libraries that are FIPS certified. And to complete this goal, we need to audit the cryptographic models used within OpenStack and replace, if possible, or document this as a limitation libraries which are not FIPS certified. The champion for this goal is Ade, and all of the changes that are proposed for this goal can be identified with the Garrett topics, FIPS compatibility or FIPS compliance. And there are a few completion criteria for this here. I would go like, yeah, I think it's good to go over this a little bit. So yeah, for the Yoga 2 milestone, the goal was to that projects that currently have FIPS CI, jobs in flight. So they should have this job merged. These jobs should be sufficient to test the base functionality, and in particular those areas expected to be affected by FIPS. The test should pass, and limitations uncovered should be documented. And the current role to enable FIPS mode should be enhanced to allow FIPS to be enabled on Ubuntu environments. That's still a limitation for us. I know folks are looking to alternatives for that, but currently, and the things we faced most issues with in Manila was migrating the jobs from Ubuntu to CentOS. There were a few issues with that, especially with the dev stack setup. And a few drivers also hit into some issues, as for example, the LVM driver and the Ceph driver. So we had a few issues with those, and we solved those issues, but they were mostly related to setup, not to the driver functioning itself. So yeah, those setups with CentOS should now be fixed, and it should be working just fine. And yeah, for compatibility on milestone 3, all OpenStack projects should have at least one job to test their functionality when FIPS is enabled. This test should pass with limitations documented and run ref stack tests in FIPS mode. This test should pass, and it's expected that some FIPS specific configuration may be required. All right, so there is the completion criteria for FIPS compliance now, which is what we will be pursuing for the Zed cycle, which is a review for milestone, which is a review of crypto used within OpenStack should be completed. This review should identify crypto that's currently is not FIPS certified and propose alternatives depending on which libraries are identified and the project impact. A schedule for replacement can be decided at that time. And a plan for the formulated should be formulated to provide FIPS compliant replacement option to Paramico across OpenStack projects. Paramico is one of the limitations we currently have, and the approach for that was to try to patch Paramico. I think there is more information on this over this goal. It's very well written, so if you would like to take a look at this, please do so. And also, if you have any questions, you can ask this. But yeah. For Manila, we have worked on a few changes during this cycle to ensure FIPS compatibility. They are tagged here in this link, and we did propose our job. It's passing, and it was passing at the time. I just triggered it again. Apparently, there is an issue with our experimental jobs, which already got in touch. It's not like the FIPS experimental job itself. The issue was mostly related to one of the scenario tests we have. So in this change, you now see here that I'm disabling one of the tests we have, but we do not want to get that merged. I basically removed the triple CI CentOS 8 scenario. It was failing. I mean, it was hitting to an issue that we didn't even have the chance to get the outputs for any other CI job. I already got in touch with the triple CI folks, and they are working on this issue. There are some things going on at the moment. This morning I rechecked it because there were a few issues with the testing, and now it should pass, I believe. But yeah, for CentOS 8, we were like 100% covered, but we decided that we should possibly be already like merging the CentOS 9 job at first, because I mean, in that way we wouldn't need to merge jobs twice. For example, we would have like the CentOS 8 first, and then we would need to go and merge the CentOS 9 first. We did have a success result for the CentOS 9 in another change, so that's why we said, okay, we should possibly like already switch the other one. This is the output. I don't think it's going to be available anymore because it's been like a few weeks since we did this, or it might be. But yeah, the job is passing, and if there are a few issues, we should possibly be addressing them. But we had the jobs passing, but we decided it would be better to continue already pursuing like CentOS 9, which would be the target for us. And there is also another change for patching Paramico, and we already have received some reviews on that. Mostly, the only driver that hit into these issues like patching Paramico was the generic driver. The other drivers didn't hit into issues like this. So, I mean, it's not a high dependency on having this change merged for all of the drivers we have, but for the generic one, I mean, it would break the generic driver. So yeah, the next step, as I mentioned, is compliance, and we aim to have some changes and merge during the site cycle. And yeah, I mentioned already what compliance means. So now it's up to you folks to take a look. And if you would like to add something else, I know there might be some more information to this, or there might be something I'm missing. So Ade, Ashley, if you want to add something.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that introduction, Carlos. That helped a lot. Just a couple of things that I want to clarify here. In terms of the community goal, you'll notice over there that there are milestones that are there. there's two stages to the community goal. One is to have it being accepted as a proposed goal, and the other one is to have it actually selected as a selected goal. And so the goal that is there, it was accepted as a proposed goal. So this is something that the foundation has agreed that we should do. The actual selection, however, is going to specify the time frame and the milestones that are there, and so the milestones that are there are definitely aspirational in the sense that we've actually blown past them, and we haven't actually gotten to all of the things, but the idea is, you know, I've spoken with a TC this week, and because of the progress that we have made over across the community, we're ready to be able to select the milestones. The TC is very careful to only select milestones that we are sure that we're going to hit. And so for the Z cycle, I think that we plan to select the milestones all for compatibility, which means that hopefully by the end of the Z cycle, certainly by the end of the Z cycle, all of the projects, including Manila, will have their FIPS jobs as part of what they have there, as part of the CI. And then we also hope to have the Ubuntu jobs as well too. So that will be as part of the Z cycle, and then more likely than not, the getting all the other projects to be there will probably be on the AA cycle. So the timeline is going to be a little different than what is actually there, and I do plan to put up a new patch to actually get the goal as selected for those timelines. And again, you know, based on the conversations we've had with the TC, that is most likely to happen because we are very close at this point to getting at least the first part of that, which is all of the CI jobs in all of the major projects. If you were interested in seeing the status of all of the different projects that are there, I'll put that in the chat now, and we can actually add that. But that is the status right now of all of the projects everywhere, and you'll notice Manila is on there as well too. So that is that kind of shows you where everything is. As we mentioned before, you know, all of the FIPS jobs up to this point have been on CentOS, and the reason for that is that Ubuntu, a canonical, you know, says that enabling FIPS is something that requires a subscription. And that was very difficult because the CI is essentially an open system. Anyone can download an image and go in as root, and then if they have a subscription key that is there, they can find that subscription key, and then they could use that subscription key, right? And so that is you know, one of the main reasons, for example, that we use CentOS over here instead of RHEL in the upstream CIs because of the subscription key issue. Since then, however, I've been in contact with Canonical, and Canonical has agreed to provide the OpenStack Foundation with a subscription key that could be used specifically for FIPS testing and nothing else. And so we are in the process right now of setting all that stuff up, or Canonical actually is in the process right now of going through all of the bureaucratic things that need to happen in order to make that happen. But we hope that at least within the next month or so to be able to have FIPS tests that are run on Canonical. And so this could, for at least some projects, you know, alleviate the burden that they have to actually get things running on CentOS when they can't. With you guys being on the bleeding edge, you've done all the work already, so that's great. But if there are cases where it is helpful to use Canonical, that may be something we want to do, and it may be something you want to do anyways, because what you find is that when the OS is enabling FIPS and doing the things in the crypto modules to do in FIPS, it's a sort of a moving target. There are things that passed on CentOS 8 that didn't pass on CentOS 9, for example, because crypto policies were tightened up in OpenSSL and other places. And so things may be different as well on Canonical as well too, as opposed to CentOS, right? So on the point of CentOS 8 versus CentOS 9, definitely the guidance there is to use CentOS 9. In fact, OOO right now is moving to pretty much all. Well, they're going to do a mixed mode kind of thing, but in general, we're testing FIPS. OOO is going to testing FIPS by default on CentOS 9 and above, you know, there have been issues that we've seen with CentOS 8 and FIPS, and with some of the stability of CentOS 8. We've seen some stability issues with CentOS 9, but certainly with CentOS 8 as well too. We definitely want to be testing on CentOS 9 rather than CentOS 8. So we're moving there. That's where we're going to be moving all of the FIPS jobs, essentially to CentOS 9 moving forward. Yeah, I mean, everything looks good over there. I've noticed, you know, everything looks like it appears to be passing. I think the only thing we have left there is just that one patch which you mentioned, you know, which does a small monkey patch on Paramiko that needs to merge in order to get everything merged in. And if anyone wants to talk about that, we can definitely talk about that. But I have, you know, looks like things are going well at this point. And then in terms of compatibility, I will, sorry, in terms of compliance, I'll give you another link over here. And this is something also that I shared with the TC. I did an initial audit, and this is right here. So this is an initial audit, and basically what I did is I started from something we called an ERP. Don't ask me what that stands for, but basically it is something that we as a Red Hat as a vendor needs to create in order to do export compliance. And this is a place where we find all of the crypto that is all over the, you know, within the product. We identified the crypto that was at least within the Red Hat, within ROS 17, which is not FIPS compliant, and then looked at the dependencies for the things that we found that were not FIPS compliant. And so if you happen to know of more things than that, please let me know, or, you know, put it on the things over there so that we know that we need to look at it. But essentially, these are the things that we did find. And going through this, it turns out that getting to the point where things are compliant is actually going to be at least a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of things there, which, and if you read the notes over there, some things we are using them, but we can configure things so that we don't use them. For example, we're not going to be using, you know, ED 25519. There are some places where, for example, libsodium is something that, for example, was used in ED 2219, but we're not using that, and we can configure it. And in fact, the latest versions don't use it. So those kinds of things we've gone through there. And again, the main complication is Paramiko. Paramiko is used everywhere. And as you can see, one of the reasons that it's not FIPS compliant is that Paramiko itself, one, does some crypto in it, and two, pulls in a bunch of libraries that are not FIPS compliant. And so, you know, this is something that we're going to be looking for a replacement for Paramiko. The tough thing is that there's really hard to find a good replacement right now, but that's one of the things that we're going to be investigating through this. I don't anticipate that we will necessarily replace Paramiko within the Z cycle, but that might be something that's an A goal, most likely. We will probably during this cycle be doing the investigation to figure out how to replace things, what to replace it with, and how to replace it within the Z cycle, and then actually do it within the A cycle. So that's probably the more realistic goal as to what's going to happen there.
Awesome, Ali. Yeah, thanks
Perfect.
for
So
your.
I had a follow-up question with the Paramiko story. So yep, firstly, thanks for the explanation. Sorry, I didn't respond, but I and Carlos had a chat right after you responded to the the monkey patching question on the review. So I mean, for me, the biggest fear was we did do this with eventlet, and we kind of burnt ourselves a little bit. So every time you'd kind of try to monkey patch a third-party library and it changes underneath you, it's a risk. And can it change underneath you? I like your explanation that yes, in stable branches we have upper constraints. We really don't expect the library to jump from underneath us. But this has been violated more than once before. And the biggest culprit of that is my employer. I mean, we shipped some packages in CentOS as part of RHEL, of course. That we applied some security fixes that brought in newer versions of the library. So it was inevitable. So the upper constraints are frozen, but inevitable that we had to ship something that ended up breaking some OpenStack package because we had monkey patched it. So although this thing over here seems innocent, that get fingerprint method is being used a lot in Paramiko. So that's my concern with monkey patching that. But what I hear you say is that Paramiko is also bringing in other components which are also FIPS in compliant or non-compliant. So there's a bigger problem than just that method that's being monkey patched.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
ultimately, we're probably going to end up either we're either going to end up fixing Paramiko, or we're going to end up replacing Paramiko with something else. I mean, just looking at Paramiko right now, it may be too big to fix, and the rate at which changes are merged, may make it infeasible to do that. So I don't know what's going to happen with Paramiko in general. But yes, I mean, if we're concerned about it breaking, downstream, I mean, the change itself is pretty small, and I don't really see how. It's unlikely for me to see how this would end up breaking. Our patch would end up breaking things eventually, simply because the patch is so small. And I understand the concern about things changing underneath here, but this is a pretty small change, and we do have the constraints and all that kind of stuff. So
yep. And so how is it for I mean, because Paramiko is used all over the place in OpenStack. So how are the other projects taking this?
So this is the only place where right now so far where we have had to patch Paramiko other than in Tempest. So the other projects, if you think about what we use Paramiko for, right? Paramiko is used for basically SSHing from one system to another. Of course that shows up in our Tempest tests, because we do Tempest tests where we SSH from one system to another, and we see what happens there. I don't know exactly what the usage over here in Manila is. But other than that, there hasn't been a place that we found yet so far where we've had to patch Paramiko in other projects that I know of right now. So I think you guys are just happening to use Paramiko in some way to do SSHing, right? So
and
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain that this happens even in Cinder. I mean, we kind of are a fork of Cinder, and way back into Nova as well. right? So any kind of device that is associated with Cinder as a third-party storage system that happens to use SSH, not a lot of them do. The Cinder code has these SSH utils to kind of create and manage a bunch of SSH connections. So it's a similar concept here in Manila. And I'm not sure if Nova or Ironic have similar things. And wouldn't Octavia also need it? Because the Octavia agent and stuff.
As far as I know, so again, this hasn't. So if this is something that's showing up in third-party tests, for example, then this is something where things may fail there. But unfortunately, right now, I don't think a lot of third-party folks are testing using FIPS. So
yep.
Right, so that could be part of the problem over there. Is that there are third-party folks that are not testing yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've tried to encourage people to do so, but it's there's a sort of a double hill to climb in the sense that a lot of the third-party tests are probably not using RHEL or not using CentOS, right? They're using Ubuntu. So the first thing they've got to do is they've got to figure out how to get their tests working under CentOS, and then they've got to figure out what's going on in FIPS, right? And so while we've try to encourage people, at least on the downstream side by talking to partners and saying that this is happening and so on. I'm not sure whether or not, they've actually gone to that point and figured that out. In terms of, so that's one thing. The other thing is, but once we do get Ubuntu going, that is going to be a problem then, and maybe then at that point they will start testing FIPS, and that's when we'll start seeing failures that happen because of this. So
yeah,
I think
makes total sense. So it answers my point as to why have we not hit this so far, because we have not tested anything that needs SSH outside of Manila.
Right.
Yeah, in a sense, we kind of do an integrated, I mean, we test the whole cloud with the generic driver. So that's kind of where we hit this. So yeah, makes sense. So is it possible then, because I see with Carlos's patches, we're able to not have this but still have the experimental LVM job, correct? We don't need the patched Paramiko over there. The only thing that the patched Paramiko is really impacting is the generic driver job, which we don't currently have plans to enable FIPS mode on at the moment. It was good for testing so far.
Yeah, even though we have like some people using for production, which is like not required. The generic driver job was the only one that needed the patching Paramiko to work. That actually like needed and didn't work without the patching Paramiko. So yeah, the idea of adding that patching was just because like we know that people use that, and even though they weren't supposed to, because it's supposed to be a testing driver, but we know people use that, and we didn't want to break those.
Makes sense. And so I was just wondering if we can kick this discussion off, maybe the OpenStack mailing list, because I'm certain this is there at least in Cinder, where we're possibly allowing SSH connections into another system. So we could just make a post and check what the best course of action here is. It looks to me that you have it the right way anyway, because you're not able to get the patch merged in Paramiko, and this is just a baby step into replacing Paramiko entirely. So I don't expect too many objections, but I wanted this wider acceptance, if anything, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. We could totally put that up there and see what people say. It will be useful to get the information, to get this folks knowing about it as well too, and also to get reactions across the different projects. But yeah, I totally agree. That sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks. There are a few more questions here. The next one is the impact on Manila to Manila client and Manila TPS plugin and Manila image elements. Initially, we started testing by the Manila core component, but it is in our test plans to add jobs to test FIPS for all of these project to these repositories as well. So that's the thing. One of the action items we have for this, to add a few jobs to. I mean, it's not. I think there is a chance, or we will need to discuss if we want to keep those jobs and how do we want to keep those jobs in those repositories. But the idea is to at least have some runs and tests to ensure that these repositories will also be compatible and also compliant with the FIPS. Any more questions on this? I don't know if there is something else. It's quite simple to. I think we will be adding those soon.
Great.
Yeah. Next thing that we have here is on timeline, and so yeah, that cycle is compatibility jobs merged across OpenStack and the EAA cycle, the completion. On this one, as I mentioned, we will possibly be going over like the dependencies and checking, doing an audit and identifying what needs to be changed and how to change those, and then for EAA, actually do the changes and get them in. SHA-1, a rumor it is being disabled by default in CentOS 9. Really, CentOS 9. And we use SHA-1 with hash sleep. Should we switch?
So just to be clear, SHA-1, what is being disabled by default in CentOS 9 is using SHA-1 as part of signatures. So if you use SHA-1 as part of a signatures, then it will fail by default. It is possible to do it if you pass in a particular parameter, but if you don't have to do it, then it's better to change to use something that is not SHA-1 as part of a signature. In any case, under FIPS, it is not allowed to use SHA-1 as part of a signature. So I guess that's the question: is that do you use SHA-1 as part of a signature anywhere within Manila?
Not really. I think what we're doing is we're kind of munching a configuration that's passed as a dictionary and kind of storing the SHA-1 representation onto the database.
Okay.
And that's just basically compacting the stuff for a later check on it.
Okay. Yeah, then you should not be affected at all by these changes. And I'm guessing your FIPS job is passing, so and that's using CentOS 9, and I know that the SHA-1 change has gone into this version of CentOS 9 already, because I knew it broke a whole bunch of different things, which we fixed. But for example, in Swift, there were temp URLs and things like that were signed using SHA-1, and those things broke. But in general, yeah, if you're not doing it, then you should not be affected by the SHA-1 change in CentOS.
That makes sense. Nice, thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, so
Awesome.
last question we have here is Eduardo mentioned he's seeing some FIPS related Ansible playbooks and bash scripts from SSG and Ansible lockdown from Midpoint Group. Would they work for Ubuntu?
I don't know those scripts. I'll have to take a look. But the point though is, and maybe this is doing what you have to do on the OS is you have to you essentially start it in FIPS mode. So it's adding an extra parameter on the command line, which is FIPS equals 1 essentially, and what that does is it puts the crypto modules in FIPS mode, which means that they disable certain parameters and not others, and so on. That on the Ubuntu side, as far as I know, requires a subscription an Advantage subscription in order to work correctly. So I don't know if I have to look at those bash scripts and playbooks to see what they do. But the way that Ubuntu wants you to do it, and the way that it is correct, that what they say is that in order to do things correctly, you have to start the subscription and get it working there. and have to have a subscription key in order to unlock the appropriate crypto module things to do. So that's why I would be surprised if something like that did work on Ubuntu. But I could be wrong. They may do the things, but in any case, it may not matter because, as I mentioned, Ubuntu is going to provide the foundation with a key that they'll be able to use.
Oh, that's nice. It's the Ubuntu Advantage thing, right?
Yes, it's the Ubuntu Advantage. It's the Ubuntu Advantage.
These crypto modules, are they like a modified version of the packages from the Ubuntu repositories? Is that it, or it's more configured?
No, I think I mean the crypto modules are really part of the, I think they're really part of the kernel. I'd have to check and see exactly, but I think they really are built into the kernel, or at least a lot of it is. So I would be surprised if I would be surprised if you could get certain packages or not certain packages. But point being is I would be wary about using other things there other than exactly what Ubuntu wants you to use for crypto, because who knows how that's maintained and so on and so forth, and you want to get a true representation of what Ubuntu says is FIPS compliant and nothing else, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Any more thoughts or questions to ask? Okay, I think that doesn't know. Thank you all for attending to this session. Thanks Ade and Andre for joining us today to talk about FIPS and for the detailed updates you gave us. Yeah, so the Manila folks are going to be possibly seeing a few more Manila changes over the cycle. So yeah, if you are curious, want to ask for reviews or such, please ask us. Please help us with the reviews, and if you have questions to ask, please do so. And yeah, we do have some one action item from this, which is to kick off a discussion in the OpenStack discuss, talking about patching Paramiko. Yeah, so again, thanks. And I think if you don't have something else to add, I think we can switch to the next topic.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, going to the next topic then. Is tech debt on Manila. We have been having these sessions for basically every cycle we have, and where we want to bring up and discuss some of the things that we still would like to do in Manila, and things that we want to get some progress and so on. The first one of them is, and that has had some progress finally over the last cycle. This one was on me. I basically got I was gifted with one of the topics or one of the proposed goals that we have for OpenStack, which is to migrate from also root rep to privsep, which is like a consistent way, and a lot of other projects are getting this migration done as well. So I don't want to extend too much on this, but yeah, there were a few changes merged over the past cycle. The one that kickstarts everything is the boilerplate, which is the one that basically adds like the structure for the privsep in Manila, and then we had the LVM driver be migrated from root rep to privsep 2. So there and yesterday I think another change was merged, which was like basically us removing a function that used root rep, and that we realized added a comment realizing that the function wasn't being used yet, so we could remove that. No need to keep that one. And still there are a few open changes for this. One of them is migrating Ganesha calls to privsep. This one's ready for review. Also, there is Gluster FS to be migrated, and the container driver is also in progress. It's needing merge conflict. It's going to be, I think, one of the most tricky ones alongside the networking commands we issue, because there are like lots of commands and we need a good structure for those. So yeah, that's it for the progress on PrivSep. There are projects that are still haven't started yet, the PrivSep migration, but there are some that completed and some that are in progress. Ours is in progress finally. So yeah, over the cycle, you'll be seeing more changes to PrivSep and migrating some of those commands we run under root privileges. Cool. Next one is dropping Python Keystone client from Python Manila client. And basically, to summarize, the Keystone client has been deprecated, and people are being like in favor of the Keystone Auth. And then there are a few differences in the sessions created in Keystone Auth. So there is some documentation on the migration for this, and we have been pursuing this for some time in Manila. And there is the difference between the authentication plugins in this documentation, and like what are the advantages, for example, of using Keystone Auth, for example, some more authentication methods and some new features. So a few changes already were proposed in Manila for Python Manila client. A few of them were merged, and there is one which is the big one that it's still in progress. And I see there's a question here in the commit message. I don't know if you guys would like to comment on this, like Victoria, and if you think we should be pursuing this or reassigning this goal. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. No, this is, thanks for the call out. We kind of dropped the ball on this. I'm to blame here. So this was something we worked at the fag end of the Xena cycle, and then through yoga, we did no work on this at all. So it is something we got to pick up again and get it out. It is probably the only client that's still using Keystone client, and because the support, the deprecated interfaces are still supported, we've not seen a major impact on this. But I was just thinking, and we are missing auto negotiation in the OSC, and part of the way to get auto negotiation, I think, is to use Keystone Auth, and we have those. We have some support for auto negotiation via the header logic in Keystone Auth that might be helpful. So this might be enough motivation for us to get this tech debt out of the way. Like you're seeing in that patch, a lot of the legwork is complete. We kind of stalled trying to see whether the HTTP client that we currently have it needs to stay at all, because we don't use it. The client is cleanly switchable to a session client. So if there was something that, I mean, we were wondering if we were missing something. Like, you know, if there were any other entry points to that besides instantiating the Manila client. So whether to leave it behind as deprecated so that it can live on for at least another release, and then we can just drop it. That was the last discussion on that patch. So
yeah,
I don't.
just
Yep.
seconding Gotham, I just think that there is no actual doubt or block that is preventing us to continue working on this. Like we have this patch, even it's with it is working, like it was working at least. And we had to define about the getting rid of the HTTP client. But yeah, we need to continue on working on this so we can include this for the next cycle. It would be like kind of preparatory. But yeah, that's it.
Oh, cool.
I guess the question was if we need to reassign or this thing. I don't believe so. If somebody is willing to help, of course, and we are stalling, please speak up, because I guess we'd be happy to share context and you can take it over for sure.
I'm not sure if this, I remember it was going to be a community goal, but I don't know if that was the case or if it's something that we can address on that context.
I think most of the clients, at least when I see code search, I don't see anything that's pointing to Keystone client like the Manila client does. So I feel like most of them have already been ported, and it's been relatively easy, right? So when you rewrite the client, for the most part, we could have done this with V2. We didn't. So it kind of, we started accruing this tech debt from there on. And I see Cinder ported when they switched to V2 or V3. So it got easier when they were doing a major change like that. Um, but yeah, it shouldn't be hard. It's just that we didn't get some time to spend on this during the yoga cycle. So maybe it should be a Manila community goal, get rid of this tech debt.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for the updates. I think then if you, if I mean, it's, we might see some progress on this too, but yeah, it's something that we talked about, I think, in the past PTG as well, in the previous one, and we just like to bring this change up again, and
Yeah.
and ask for like updates and so on. Okay.
So let's do this. Let's talk about this again at a future IRC meeting, because I am playing right now with auto negotiation for OSC. So I'll get to know whether we can make some progress on this. Thanks, Carlos.
Great, thank you, Gautam and Victoria, for working on this. Yeah, it's a good feature to have, and we can as soon as we get this, we will be. I don't remember the Go part, but yeah, I remember hearing something about like that, and yeah, thanks for working on this. Okay, next one, next item we have on the list is Cinder or and Nova Online extension support with the generic driver. Currently, we detach and reattach volumes in generic driver. There are a few more links added to this. Gautam, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. So this has been an open item, like a missing feature, really. So generic, as you know, is the reference driver that we use. But I'm not. I mean, we saw in OpenStack the support for online extension of volumes, but the generic driver forever has been trying. I mean, the way it does extends is it disconnects. So all clients lose access when an extension is happening, and then it remounts the thing, so clients can reconnect. There are no impact. There's no other impact on access rules or something. Nothing else to be done via Manila. But anytime you do an extension, this is what's happening. And I mean, we kind of discussed this when the feature was brand new. I see that quite a few improvements have been made in Nova and in Cinder to support online extensions. So I guess it's time's ripe to try to implement this in the generic driver. So it's just a feature RFE. So I'm not aware of any customer or sorry user that is needing this feature as such, or has pushed on this. I think the AI we can do over here is trying to see if anyone's interested to like explore the generic driver and contribute, and this can be a good first task sort of thing.
Awesome.
And this,
Yeah.
I think, comes from the list of Manila to-dos that we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
A nice to have feature.
Definitely. Yeah. It's kind of a wish list or request for investment. Yeah. Thanks for bringing this up. And if someone is willing to and would like to have some adventures with the generic driver, yeah, please let us know. But we can definitely bring this up again. Next one is also related to the generic driver. It's 26 volumes limit in the generic driver. There is some mention to it in the documentation, and it states that one of the Nova's configuration configurations only allows 26 shares per share server. This limit comes from the maximum number of virtual PCI interfaces that are used for block device attaching. There are 28 virtual PCI interfaces in this configuration. 2 of them are used for server and needs other 26 for server needs, and other 26 are used for attaching block devices that are used for shares. Yeah, that's another thing. And I see here I mentioned to supporting virtual SCSI. I think you added this mention in the past one. Would you like to add something on this also, Gautam?
Yeah, so this probably is pending testing. So and it's been done elsewhere. So I know it, for instance, works. So if you were to, we could set up the Manila flavor with that's being tested in the CI, and try to run a test which does more than 26 volumes. That's, I think, what's pending here. And so we could pop off that known restriction and kind of add a note saying, add a note showing how you can do this in a production cloud. So that's kind of what's the AI here, I think. And we don't need to do anything in the CI. I think we don't ever hit this limit. But this has been reported by other users that have tried to put the generic driver in production, and they've pursued other paths. So we added support for limiting the number of shares that are exported via any share server generically. So that's the sort of thing that they resorted to. So they kind of set that up, and allow the generic driver to spawn more share servers, which is actually a good thing. I mean, we really don't want to overload a single NFS server or a CIF server with exporting way too many volumes. So if you were looking to balance the load across your share servers, it's actually a good thing to have it configurable like that. But should you want more, I think we should test this and see whether it works, or if the generic driver somehow needs to adapt to support this. Maybe there are some places where we've added some artificial limitation over here as well in the code that we need to clean up. So that's the thing here. So we just need somebody to test this and see what's needed.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the updates on this. And yeah, that's another action item for us. And last but not least is the published container driver image on tarbals.openstack.org or Quay.io. The issue is that, I mean, there has been some movement in some changes where we, for example, specifically in the security service update support or security service setting, or there was another feature as well where we modified this anyways. But the thing is that the container driver had some modifications, and where we added a few extra packages. For example, the open LDAP, if I recall correctly, and then that was required in order to run those tests, those security service updates, and the adding security services to share networks that are currently being used. So that was something done for that functionality. We did implement that for the container driver as well, but at the end, we never updated or published the new container driver image with the new packages. So we are not able to test with Tempest in that container, in the container driver, because we do not have that image updated. So that's the main issue here. And I think there might be alternative approaches to this, to publishing this container image, but I mean, I think this was implemented over the Wallaby cycle, if I recall correctly, and then we didn't get to like update this container driver image and start testing this in the CI. So yeah, any thoughts on this and alternative ways to share this image?
Yeah, so just a question. For example, there are some artifacts that are uploaded in a separate pipeline in the OpenDev Zuul CI. I believe one of them is the publish or promote pipeline, which, for example, when you have a new release, it uploads a new packaged release from to PyPy. And this happens with, I believe, almost every OpenStack project. Wouldn't a job that builds the Docker image using the Docker file of the Manila image elements repository and uploads it to, like, for example, tarballs.openstack.org be a viable option, like creating a job that does this every time a change is merged? I'm not sure if this is already done, but I
Currently
believe
it is. No, you're right. You're on the right path. That's kind of what this is. This is what you're referring to, which does it for the service image that we use for the generic driver, right? So if you look at the playbook, it basically takes the built image and just pushes it to the tarballs.o.o. We just didn't add this for the container driver. We could just use the same job and the same template, change the image name, and start pushing the container image as well. But I think the discussion here was, it's a container image. We shouldn't be really tarballing it and pushing it onto the tarballs website if there are plenty of container registries that we are already pulling from in the CI. And I think the most popular of them that's being used in the OpenStack CI is Quay. So if if somebody could probably has the bandwidth and wants to work on it, it's an interesting project, I think, to adjust the scripts, create a similar artifact publishing gate job that or a post job that basically takes whatever container image is built and pushes it onto whichever container registry.
Yeah, that's right. A registry makes way more sense if it's available.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's try to do that. I think on this cycle. Anyone willing to take this? Okay, I think I could take that for me. I don't know if I think it wouldn't take much time to get this done, so I can do the investigation.
Yeah, and I suppose, Carlos, there is some container building scripts itself in some of the open dev repos. I can't think of which ones at the moment, but we can connect and find something.
Yeah, that's the one thing to investigate on this too.
Yeah, and there'll be probably a mirror change on devstack plugin.sh that's there, and we're allowed to pull from that place.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thank you. I'll do that and possibly have an update soon. All right. So yeah, I think we covered all of the items from TechDebt. Any more questions on this? And would you like to add something else about these items or something we missed? I'll take silence as a no. I think we do have time for a 5-minute break, and then we will get back to discuss the Manila CSI updates. So, and then we will have the community hour after this, so we can brainstorm about the TikTok release model proposal. But yeah, let's catch a 5-minute break, and then we can get back with discussing Manila CSI updates. Okay. Yeah. So now we are going to have Gautam, Victoria, and I think Gasham signed up for this too. No, it's not Gasham. Sorry, it's Robert.
Yes.
I usually confuse the nickname with Ganshos. Sorry about that. Yeah. So yeah, Manila CSI updates. Folks, for yours.
All right, I let
Gautam,
yeah, Gautam or Robert
Yep.
lead this one, maybe.
Oops. Okay, sorry, I was talking and I was muted. Good point. No, I was gonna say, Robert, do you want to give us like a rundown of anything that happened between the last PTG and this one first, and then we can discuss the few open items that we thought it'll be good to like share with the community here.
Mhm. Well, not much has happened since the last PTG, I guess. It's been pretty quiet. I think the only important item is, at least from what I've been working on, is the backups. So we can go over this for now. So the current state is we need a way to expose snapshots as volumes. So for SFFS, which is the file system that we are mainly focused on, at least in my team, this would involve mounting the parent share of the snapshot, finding the snapshot root, and then exposing that directory to workloads. So just yesterday, I submitted a pull request to SFFS CSI to do exactly this. So you give it root path of the volume and ID of the snapshot, and it finds the correct directory and exposes it to the pods that want to mount the share. So all of this heavy lifting has been already done in an external component, and the only thing that Manila CSI needs to do is get the export location of the share, get the snapshot ID, send this information to SFFS CSI, and that's it basically. So why do we need this? So with backup and recovery tools like Velero, you normally wouldn't want to back up a live volume. You need to take a snapshot of it and back up that. However, snapshots in Kubernetes are basically opaque objects that are storage specific. You can't really attach them to a pod and browse them like a regular file system. So first you would create a PVC of the snapshot, mount that PVC, and then pick up this new PVC. So the snapshot is like an intermediate step between backing up volumes. So the problems that we have run across while working on this. So first of all, this workflow of having a PVC, snapshotting it, and creating a new PVC from it, Velero doesn't support it just yet. It's working in progress, but other backup solutions like Trilio, Cas10, and similar, they do support this backup workflow, but they are proprietary and closed source. So for users who or companies who have policy of using only open source projects for this sort of use cases, Velero is for now the only viable option. So we are not there yet, I guess, is the final decision about this. Then few other pain points with Velero. under the hood, when you pick up a volume, it uses RESTIC to upload data to the backup location, like S3 or something else. It can eat a lot of memory. We have seen also in production a lot of out of memory killed pods because of this. And another issue as a result, so the backup needs to be done in a single go within a single pod. When that pod is killed by running out of memory, the backup will not continue. So you basically need to clean up the whole thing and start over again, which can be very time-consuming process. So that's another issue. And lastly, last week we've discovered a bug in FIPS that prevents accessing snapshots that have too long names. And such names are generated also by Manila. So when you mount the share and go to the .snap directory and try to list any of the snapshots, you get file not found entry because of the bug. There is already a fix for this issue, so that's good. However, in the current state, it's yeah, there are a couple of blocker problems that we have before really deploying Velero as a backup solution. And yeah, I think that's it from me. Any comments?
Awesome. No, thank you. I definitely want to understand the Valeri. Oops. Can you hear me?
You are muted.
Oh, still?
Okay.
No, I can hear you, Gotham.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Robert? Or is there an
Yes,
audio issue?
yes.
Okay, cool. All right, definitely want to hear some more about the Velero issue, issues that you're hitting. So if there are any open bugs or something that you'd, that could give us that context that you're sharing, it'd be most welcome if you could drop the links over there. But thanks
Yes, I'll do it.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks for elaborating on that stuff. And I was just pulling up some PRs that merged between the last PTG and this one. I think the most major of them was to enable the E2E tests against the repo. And on the PR, Robert has quite some notes as to what tests are running and what are not, and what the problems are with the ones that are not yet. And I think that resulted in some more issues being opened against the Kubernetes E2E framework as well. And another thing I think is we're plumbing the node volume stats from the node providers, the node plugins through the Manila CSI. So that's a PR for that one. I don't remember if there was anything major. I think there was something to add labels. I might be missing a link over there. Is there anything to share about these, Robert?
Let me check really quickly. Other than this, there was a bug in controller expand volume with the unit size it was using while expanding a volume. It was gigabytes. It should have been bytes. Sorry. GIB to make it easier. And this caused issues with the expansion never succeeding, because when you convert the values from one unit to the other, it's always more than it should have been, and the controller would just keep on resizing the volume indefinitely. Yeah, and that's fixed. And I think that's it. But then what you already mentioned, I can see that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, cool. So that's as far as updates go. And we had a couple of other discussions that I wanted to bring here. One was fairly simple, which was the issue with optional features. So Manila treats the creation of snapshots and the cloning of snapshots into new shares as both optional features, alongside many other optional things that that Manila shares can do. And I think the CSI driver is probably one of the places where I mean, we've implemented this the way Manila has it, right? So you whatever share type is used to create the share, which is showing up in the storage class, we kind of get the share and then inspect the share as to whether it has the capability to take snapshots, to clone those snapshots, or to revert snapshots, etc. So that's kind of fairly useful, especially when there were downstream distributions of Kubernetes that were trying to use snapshots out of Manila backend that would not support it. So that was one of the issues, and it was fairly straightforward to explain that in that context, the OpenStack administrator is who controls what can be done, and they know that whether the backend that's enabled supports these capabilities or not. And even if they support it, the administrator has to opt in for these features. And knowing the cloud model and how things are supposed to be built and used with Manila, it's possible that that an administrator disables snapshots to some storage classes and stuff. So the CSI driver already handles this gracefully, was the conclusion. The other big issue that I think is currently an open issue is is the support for RWO volumes. So I can explain the backstory here. So if Manila CSI is available, let's say in OpenShift, and that's possibly a provisioner for RWX volumes. There is now a thing of also using it to provide RWO volumes. And so that's something that OpenShift today does. So it sets up the external attacher sidecar that's necessary, and plumps RWO volumes as well. And this was working fine, except for the FS group feature. So FS groups specifically applies only to RWO volumes, and it applies to volumes that have an FS type that is set to something. It should not be none. So as long as there is a FS type that's being set on the storage class, and if if you're getting an RWO volume and you've set up some sort of FS group in your security context for your pods, then what kubelet does is it tries to mount the share, mount the volume, and then recursively start modifying permissions if it notices that the file system group that's on the volume is not the same as the one specified in the pod spec. And this was failing in our E2E tests because the driver they used in this context was this FFS driver. and they were testing it with CFFS via NFS, where they had no control of what the NFS server would do in this case. So the NFS server had turned off root squash, so it was possible for for somebody appearing as root to perform these chown and chmod from the front end, but the server would not represent the same numeric IDs that the client was actually expecting. And so that's something that's enforced in the E2E test. It kind of looks, it sets the FS group to, let's say, ID 20 and expects to see these files being chmoded to that. And that was failing because what is 20 to the client is something else to the server. And so the number was lost in translation. So it kind of bounces back to how does this work? And when you look at it with shared file systems across different CSI drivers across different cloud providers, for instance, the server that's exporting these shares needs to also be in line and in tune with with the client when they're doing file permissions and file ownership modifications like this. And more specifically, if you're starting to use NFS 4.1, for instance, there is this ID mapping that comes into picture. So the client and the server need to be on the same ID domain, else these numeric IDs don't really make sense. Or you're running some sort of a name information server that has mapping of the names as well. So this was the kind of discussion that we had, and the outcome for this was, let's assume that the OpenStack administrator has configured their NAS server in the same domain that they expect their clients to be in. So it's a very minute use case there. So let's assume that this is a single tenant cloud and or a cloud with trusted tenants where tenants are in the same ID domain. So the same authentication domain and whatnot. So it's possible that the OpenStack administrator has exposed what ID domain the OpenShift or the Kubernetes clients are supposed to be in as well. And so that's already baked into the into the pods and stuff. So when all this is working right, then these numeric changes should work in theory. So what do we have to do for that with Manila CSI? Well, the thing that's missing is the FS group policy that the CSI driver advertises. So if the FS group policy is set to none, then a kubelet will never try to modify these permissions at all. But should all these stars align and somebody wants to override that FS group policy to, en route mismatch or something, like, take effect and make these changes if you discover that the root file system has the incorrect permissions compared to what the pod spec specifies, they should be allowed to do so. So that's kind of where this discussion ended. And I thought it was acceptable, except I wanted to, I guess, bring it up back again with the community and with Robert in specific, because for us in the upstream cloud provider OpenStack, we've never really tested or claimed support for RWO volumes.
Yeah, it would be perhaps good to have some sort of flag under which the permissions could be checked, because if I suppose if an administrator by accident would choose the wrong volume access mode, instead of read write many, they would use read write one once, and they wouldn't deploy the external attacher. I think that there might be issues with conflicting permission changes from different pods and nodes.
No, absolutely, yeah. So your concern is that they can still consume the RWO volumes, but the external attacher is not there at all to enforce the once part.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And there is nothing that we can do in the CSI driver to enforce this, right? This is part of a deployment.
Yeah, so this would go into the Helm chart where admins could enable it during deployment of the driver, or wherever they are deploying it. In OpenShift, I guess it would be different.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what OpenShift currently does. It sets up the external attacher by default. And so that's kind of where they're getting the RWO semantics and stuff, and which is where the next part came in with FS groups. So assuming we have we do this, we would go modify the Helm charts in cloud provider OpenStack, or rather have different Helm charts so that we can set up a CSI driver that supports RWO. And we then work on a flag to expose this FS group type to do it to basically ensure the semantics correctly, rather than assume that kubelet can always modify these files. I suppose I don't really have much in terms of examples with, I guess, I mean, I got, when I was exploring this, I got issues in the Azure file, in EFS, for instance, and they all have the same concept of this, that, the cloud provider is somebody else, and they are not on any sort of ID domain with the clients. So it is a very, corner case that somebody wants to do FS groups and expect that the numeric IDs are matching. So on OpenShift, for instance, if you're looking at the documentation, it kind of calls this out, saying do not these PVCs are not capable of enforcing numeric ID matches and stuff. So if your application is looking for something like that, this would be a poor choice. But what's this thing better though is that with Manila there is a contract that nothing is squashed from the NAS servers, and this applies to all drivers. And we already make use of this. We have share migration, and we expect to be able to mount the share as a particular user and copy files out, etc. So if there are root squashes or all squash options enabled over there, these things will start failing. So by default, we expect the exports to be set up with no squashing. So these file system permission changes and such are just like ignored in a sense by the NAS backend. So I guess yeah, Robert, did you have anything to add?
So since this is just a deployment matter of how we deploy the driver, I think the change is minimal enough for us to in upstream to support this sort of feature, even though if it's not very commonly used, it's big enough of a use case to to justify that change.
And so, how would somebody proceed with this? Like, we open an issue against the CPO repo and try and work on it?
Definitely. That's the place.
Okay, awesome. All right, that's a good AI for me. Then I'll take a look at this. And I did hope that we'd have some more things to share with some things that we're doing downstream, but I guess we are looking to. I mean, we do have a summit presentation where we were probably planning on running some more tests You saw some of this in the past PTGs where we were running performance tests with Manila CSI, with Cinder CSI, and so on. So we're hoping to take those to take some results and share them during the Open Infra Summit that's coming up. I don't have them ready at the moment. And in terms of, do we want to chat about this FFS snapshot issue that was exposed via this workflow that you're trying through Valero, etc.? And Victoria might be more knowledgeable here than I have, because this is something that the driver is doing. It is kind of concatenating the IDs to kind of create the snapshot name on the back end.
Right. So it's pretty much that. Like every time we create a snapshot, we basically take an ID that we create. It's just a random UID, and just append that to the from the share that we are creating the snapshot from, and that's how we get the name for the snapshot. And that is an issue for Ceph because for what I understand, we are Ceph is truncating the snapshot names. That is something that probably Robert can provide more context because he hit this issue on their environment.
Yeah, so it's very easy to replicate when you snapshot a share and you cd into the .snap directory and then try to traverse any of the snapshots created by Manila. You'll get not found error from the OS because it's just some Ceph internal things, but essentially what it does, there is 80 characters limit. Ceph MDS has 80 characters limit on the directory names in the .snap directory, and since Manila generates snapshot names in the format of UUID, there are essentially two UUIDs, and when you add this plus the inode number that Ceph appends to the name, you exceed this 80 characters limit, and then once you try to visit the snapshot contents, Ceph basically cannot find what snapshot you are trying to access. So.
Right. So the name that we are storing on the control database for the shares, for the snapshots we are creating, are not the exact name that we have in the backend. So, and that's because in the backend, Ceph is truncating that long name. So fixing this shouldn't be an issue. The only thing that I'm kind of worried about is what happens for those environments that already have snapshots in this fashion. We need to figure out a way to make a change that is backwards compatible.
Yeah. So, and we have this. What we can do is, so we have this problem with other drivers. So it's just it's brand new to Ceph, but it's happened elsewhere before. So what we can do is have an alternate or fallback path. So if we go ahead and amend how we are naming these snapshots, we can call them anything else. We can even generate a brand new UUID, for instance, and just have one UUID, right? Or we can hash all of these UUIDs and come up with a new name that we can give these snapshots, or use some name etc. Whatever works for us in the driver. So we start naming these snapshots like this. And if we're looking to locate previous snapshots, we would just start putting any prior snapshot into the provider location of the snapshot itself. Right now, this FFS driver is not using this provider location attribute, and it's not exposed to end users. It is something that the driver really can use on its own. So in case there is a snapshot that's previously named and that we don't want to rename, into its new name, we can just go ahead and put that previous name in the provider location so that we can refer to it using that name instead. That's like the workaround.
So
And
yeah, the provider
we're doing
location
stuff
is
like this elsewhere.
the provider location is the actual name that we will be using in the backend. Is that correct?
Exactly. And for these old snapshots, we just assume that the old name is the provider location, unless, we could also add some logic in there to make sure that we do go ahead and rename these snapshots when the driver starts up. But renaming could be disruptive. So if somebody has mounted the snapshot, for instance, you're renaming the entire directory. So that might be, that might kick some clients out on a Manila restart. So that's not desirable.
Makes sense. And something is that we keep in the control database a field for the like for snapshots. We keep a field for the actual origin from that snapshot. So we keep a field for the share that we use in order to create a snapshot. Is it really mandatory to have the name generated in this way, having the UID for the parent share?
Not really. So at any, yeah, you're right. No, it's completely up to the driver, which is kind of why the provider location is there. So if the driver decides to name it something else, it's possible to just as long as you have a way to identify the snapshot, it's fine. You meaning the driver in this case.
Right. So perhaps like our next steps in order to address this issue basically is to start using the provider location for the cases in which we already have snapshots already created, and we want to fix this bug that we have on the Zed side, and also maybe change the way we are naming snapshots. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. So the bug that's fixed on the Zed side will allow Robert's team, for instance, or his use case to be able to mount and to navigate and get into the snapshots, which is now not possible because of that bug. But we can go ahead and start using smaller names. So yeah, that would be the way to go with it.
Okay, so we have to do both. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. To avoid the truncation and the weird translation, whatever is happening on this FFS side.
Okay, makes sense.
I think I was going to add a tracker against Ceph as well. Call this limitation or in the docs, because the name limit sounds like a reasonable thing to add in the docs.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. So yep, that's kind of what we had for the CSI updates so far. And it was a good discussion. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Victoria. Is there anything else? Any questions? All right, assume that's a no, so I can hand it back to you, Carlos.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us, folks. Thanks for joining, Robert. It's always good to see the Manila CSI updates. And yeah, that's some good progress and some good discussions there. All right, so next we are a bit late for this next topic, but I think we are still good to talk about this. I think Gotham added this, which is like the community hour, where we one of the things we would like to bring up is to discuss the TikTok release model proposal and the implications to the Manila team. I don't know if you have seen this, but this is something. It's a TC resolution that was merged um, a few months ago, I think. Yeah, but if you want to provide more context on this, Gautam, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I can summarize it. So technically, we're going into a phase of, I mean, a good deal with maturity after 26 odd releases, right? So, or close to 26 odd releases. So somebody proposed a way to, I mean, listening to users that want to stay on some of these releases, and like not have to upgrade every 6 months. And it was a good compromise, I think, between that request and the aspect that the community felt like if releases had to be longer than 6 months, it would be quite hard to get features, or even find motivation to find a lot of contributors and stuff, and to go through the whole leadership aspect of this as well, right? So I mean, running the project requires quite a lot, even if Carlos makes it look easy. So you really don't want to tag somebody with a whole 18-month job of running their projects, etc., or even 12 months and so on. So that's kind of the challenges that were there in front of the TC, and their proposal with this TikTok release model. And as you might have heard this elsewhere in the PTG, is that we every release that we make is either going to be a tick or a talk, and the tick releases are going to have some more extra support, in is if that's one way to put it, right? So if a customer or a deployer wants to stay on the tick releases, they should be able to upgrade directly from one tick release to another tick release, by completely bypassing the talk release that comes in between. And if users don't want to do this, they can obviously upgrade tick to talk to tick, as they are currently doing. So it's kind of providing a way for folks to be able to leap through releases, um, and actually formalizing that support. This already happens elsewhere. Like, for example, if you're using OOO, for instance, it has support for fast forward upgrades. And OOO's idea of fast forward upgrades is some blessed releases. You can leap across them, using this fast forward upgrade mechanism. But the TC proposal is that every other release is going to be blessed. So basically the community will get to test the upgrades between tick and tick, as much as they will test the upgrades between tick and talk. So that's the gist of it. And besides testing, I mean, Manila has already added the tick-to-tick release testing already. So even if this TikTok release model is not going to kick in until the end of this release, we went ahead and added a grenade job that does a non-disruptive, non-data path non-disruptive test, and a control path upgrade test between coming, I think, from the Xena cycle to the Z cycle, by entirely skipping the yoga cycle. That's the kind of testing that we're doing. And I think there's been other discussion elsewhere about some more kinds of tests, such as leaving certain components behind in the Xena cycle, and still having some components be on the Z cycle and interacting with these components, etc. So we'll take a look at that and add some more tests. And as far as talk-to-talk upgrades, they're not going to be something that we're supporting or testing. So certainly you can go from talk to tick, because that is always tested. But going from talk to talk is not a promise that the community wants to make at the moment. And what is it? Yeah. What does this mean in terms of support? Well, one of the biggest things that will change is deprecations. So anything that we were seeing as a deprecation, we would deprecate any minor features or minor things, like a config option that very few people are using as a corner case, case config option, etc. And or we have something where we can provide an upgrade path without interrupting end users or deployers. We still had a one cycle deprecation understanding in the community. So that was part of the stable policy as well, that we would not deprecate and remove something between releases unless we have first gone through this one cycle deprecation. Or in case of large features, like for example, a huge API that's going to go away, or something, you have a resource that's actually going to change in its representation, etc. We would maintain a 2-cycle deprecation, like we're throwing out a driver or adding a major way change to an existing third-party driver, for instance. We typically take a 2-cycle deprecation, but now you can think of it as if something is being deprecated in a tick release, it will not be removed until not the next tick release, the tick release that follows. So the deprecation windows have actually doubled. That's a big impact of this TikTok thing. So basically, we're not considering the upcoming talk as a place to remove anything. So no removals will ever be done in talk releases, for instance. Unless I think if they're well communicated, for instance. So there are some things that we cannot help, like for example, Python decides to stop supporting something. It's not that the OpenStack community can somehow support that, right? So if something comes from upstream of OpenStack, these rules do not apply. But for the most general case, if something is deprecated in a tick release, it will be kept around until the next until 2 tick releases after is when we will end up removing support for it. And what does this mean in terms of support for existing releases? Well, as you can imagine, the tick releases will be the stable branches that continue to get CI updates and all of the backports that will go through. We still expect to make them through the tick and talks of that stuff, but it's possible in a future timeline that we will start deprecating or stopping testing of a talk release. So it's possible that we might be backporting something from one tick release to another tick to a previous tick release by bypassing the talk release, because we may have deleted that code or that branch. We may have EOL'd the associated talk release and so on. This isn't set in stone yet, because we have not even come across the situation yet. But as you can imagine, if we're going through such long deprecations windows, we would effectively be supporting things for a little longer. So this question will come sooner than later. What else? In terms of rolling upgrades, it's not something we support, but if you're using any other service, the compatibility between n and n-1 is basically tick. So the n in this case is also tick, and the n-1 is really n-2 is what you're supposed to look at it as. And that's the thing. And what else? Data migrations. We don't have online data migrations to worry about as such. So you can take a look at that in the release specification itself. Anyway, I've rambled long enough, but I guess the point of bringing this up is for us to be aware that some of the tooling is changing, some of the attitude to reviews is changing as we are making these future releases. Not much will change in terms of releasing 6 months wise, where we are still going to release every 6 months, and we are still going to take features in every one of these releases. Any questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, thank you. That is an awesome summary. We've been through some discussions with that. I think during this week also there's been a call with the TC. We will need to be ensuring that this is being applied over the releases, of course. But yeah, the TC is recommending every single projects to have their own jobs. And yeah, we already have ours, Gotham proposed it, and we merged that, as you mentioned. So yeah, this job is already available for us, and it will be testing releases like tick. And then yeah, it's here, for example, it started like testing a first scenario, which would be from stable Wallaby to in that moment we merged this, it was to the master branch, which was yoga. So now, I mean, at least every single release, or when we do have a new tick releases, we will possibly be needing to like update this job. So we actually test like the tick release. So I think it's not something kind of necessary to have one job for testing each one of those, but I was wondering if it was going to be useful to, I mean, for the stable branches from now on, if we would have like a new job which will test, for example, from Victoria to Zina, for example. And then of course it's going to be like further ahead, because until that point we didn't have those. But yeah, that was something I was thinking about, and like if it was useful, because sometimes we are still merging fixes in those branches, and we could benefit or not to have a job. It could also increase the maintenance for us in the stable branches, and like having another job to be testing and to be maintaining. So yeah, I don't know what are your thoughts on this, or if you thought about this before. But I mean, I think this job is great. We already have like the first thing that would be like required, and that DC is basically recommending us. But yeah, I wasn't sure if we should be pushing, or if we should be considering the future to have jobs to like test at least one of the stable branches, like from tick to tick.
Yeah, kind of answered some of that question in this thing. So right now the job is just a template, and
Yeah,
just trying to give us any early warnings. But you're right, like we can upgrade that job to Xena, for instance, for this cycle, just to be the sync. But the real work begins in the A cycle, where we will be testing from there on forward an upgrade going from yoga to A.
yeah.
I didn't quite understood why the deprecation windows doubled. I thought in the example given there, from AA will be complete on EE. I thought it would be on CC, but like we have AA as a tick, BB would be a talk, and CC would be another tick, and then on talk we wouldn't deprecate anything, and then on tick it would happen. But I don't know if I get it wrong.
So
Yeah,
good question. So let's say you have a minor deprecation, right? Like, so this configuration option is changing its name, right? Assume that it's not a well used configuration option. We've so far had this one cycle deprecation policy for such things. So let's say it was an option called NetApp pool name search pattern, and we now want to call it ONTAP pool name search pattern. Sorry to pick on that stuff, but let's say that was the deprecation. And so we do this in the tick release. We would have, if we had followed the older model, gone to the talk release and just like popped out that option, the prior option, the supported part of that prior option. But now, instead of doing it in the talk release, we will actually be holding it through the talk release and actually popping that that option off in the in the tick cycle, which will be in your example. If you're doing the deprecation in A, we would be removing the option in C.
Yeah, that's me misleading you, Fabio. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
But the place where this is doubling, can be better felt if you're looking at a major feature. Let's say our plans, for instance, to remove NFS Ganesha that can be communicated to from DBus. So let's say we theoretically make this change in the A cycle. We don't plan to. We plan to do it in the Z cycle. But if we said we made that in the A cycle, we would have to continue maintaining support for the dbus-based Ganesha through C, and we remove it after C is shipped. So that we have two major releases where such a major change has happened. This is just an example. This is no way our plans of doing things, but that sort of a thing. If it makes sense.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, that was a good question. Also, I saw a question from Ashley on the chat as well. So we will be prioritizing work given a tick, given if a release is a tick or a talk. For example, RFPs in tick or tech that are in bug fixes in a talk.
Yeah, I think that's really up to the teams, because this has happened before. There have been instances where we have taken a stabilization cycle. So it's possible that we can designate a talk release as, okay, this is a stability cycle where we are looking to attack some tech debt, fix some long pending bugs, and not really accept too much feature work. So it's possible, but that's not part of the proposal, at least. So it's the proposal really kind of calls it out as business as usual. As far as the upstream community is concerned, features can land in both tick and talk releases, just like what they are doing today, kinds. But it's interesting, right? So if you can get the picture that most users, maybe a few times after we've done this, we realized that most users are sticking to tick releases. That gives us the leeway to do something like this, where we introduce big bang features in talk releases, in tick releases, and work through the talk release to towards stability and stuff of anything else that will come in the next release. That's a fair point. I think I've not heard any other feedback about this, but I can imagine this is on a lot of people's heads.
Yeah, I haven't heard any feedback on that as well, but I think we will be getting some questions about this. Or we can like raise this. Cool. Any more thoughts or questions you'd like to add for this topic? Okay, I would take silence as a no. Yeah, I think we pretty much are like at the top of the hour for the topics today. So yeah, today we had good discussions as well, and we had started the day with the Zuul v3 thing, the Zuul v3 topic. I see there are like lots of answers here to the questions we asked. And also you've talked about FIPS compatibility and compliance, and a bit about the tech that we have in Manila, and some Manila CSI updates as well. And finishing up with this, the community hour. So yeah, it was a pretty positive week. I'm happy about that because we got to cover all of the topics we scheduled, and we had good attendance during those days. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for staying over these discussions. It was pretty positive, and I will be sharing the summary with you in the next week. Also, I'll be updating this session to YouTube as well. And yeah, for those who would like to stay, we're going to be hosting our happy hour right after this call. So let me stop the recording. Thank you all for joining. This wraps up our PTG for this week. Thank you, folks.